What did the Earth look like at the time of the world's last ocean? More than 300 million years ago, before the arrival of the dinosaurs, the Earth didn't have 7 continents as it does today. We've always known about these 7 continents, but the Earth hasn't always looked the same. Millions of years ago, in place of these 7 landmasses, there was a single massive supercontinent called Pangea, itself surrounded by a single ocean, the Panthalassa. Today, our continents are synonymous with topographical, geological, and climatic differences. The flora and fauna are quite different from one continent to the next. The animals of the African desert don't live side by side with the tropical forests of Indonesia. They would be incapable of surviving in such an environment. But what about life on a single continent and ocean? How could all these species cohabit? Was the climate unique and similar across the entire landmass? What exactly do we know about these ancient lands? The flora and fauna of that era seem a long way off as we speak, but they're not so far away after all. On the scale of life on Earth, these living beings are much closer to us than we might think. The Earth was born over 4 billion years ago, and these animals lived just a few 100 million years before us. Many events that took place millions of years ago have had an impact on the world we know today. A phenomenon that occurred around 200 million years ago and continues to this day. This phenomenon is the dispersal of Pangea. It took nearly 200 million years to form, until the end of the Permian. It then took a further 200 million years for it to break up and disperse, from the Triassic to the present day. This dispersal is still going on today. Before forming a new supercontinent in around 250 million years' time. Dear traveler, welcome. Today we're exploring the seabed to find out more about the living creatures that once inhabited this unique ocean. What was the Earth like at the time of the Panthalassa? Who lived in this vast ocean? What animals left their mark on Pangea? What landscapes did we encounter? Before you set off on your next adventure, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing. Are you ready? Then get on board and hang on. We're about to dock on Pangea. Here we are in the Carboniferous. You're probably a little lost, both in time and geography. To answer the first question that probably springs to mind, when are we? Well, we're between 360 and 300 million years ago, during one of the geological periods that make up the Paleozoic. The Paleozoic, which lasts a total of 288 million years, is divided into 6 periods. It was during the Paleozoic that life experienced a new evolutionary turning point. In the Precambrian, it even began to diversify, notably during the so-called Cambrian explosion 541 million years ago. It was also during this era that life emerged from the water and conquered dry land. It was at the end of the Paleozoic era that the greatest mass extinction to date took place, with the disappearance of 95% of marine species and 70% of terrestrial vertebrates. But it was also during part of the Paleozoic era that the formation of Pangea and the Panthalassa Ocean began. So this is where our incredible journey begins. To situate yourself more precisely, you need to know the major landmarks that make up our planet's stratigraphic scale. It begins with the first moments of its formation, some 4.5 billion years ago, and continues right up to the present day. The Paleozoic comprises 6 periods: Cambrian, Ordovician, Silurian, Devonian, Carboniferous, and Permian. The Carboniferous is situated just after the Devonian and just before the Permian. Our journey begins here, during this pivotal period in our history, 359 million years ago. It was then that 2 supercontinents, Proto-Gondwana and Laurasia, collided. This event was to change the course of Earth's history, shaping its landscapes and impacting life on the continent, as well as in marine waters. Before we talk about the collision of these supercontinents, it would be interesting to learn more about the 2 continents that formed Pangea, don't you think? Proto-Gondwana was born from the billing of Rodinia, around 750 million years ago. This fracture gave rise to Eastern Gondwana and Western Gondwana. A few million years later, around 600 million years ago, these 2 continents collided. They collided with the Congo Craton. This collision led to a new continental formation, the Pan-African Mountains. This mountain formation and the geological mechanisms behind it are known as orogenesis. Gradually, terrains, i.e. pieces of fragments of continents, break off from Gondwana, which was located towards the South Pole. These blocks drifted northwards. Laurasia, also known as the Old Red Sandstone Continent, is a supercontinent that formed during the Silurian, when the continents of Laurentia, Baltica, and Avalonia collided. Such phenomena inevitably had an impact on the face of the Earth and on the evolution of living organisms. This new collision is synonymous with a new orogeny, the Caledonian orogeny. Now that you've followed their birth, you're ready to witness their collision. The collision of 2 supercontinents. It all starts with them. As you can see, Proto-Gondwana is slowly drifting northwards and begins its collision with the supercontinent Laurasia. This phenomenon lasted millions of years and is still active today thanks to plate tectonics. From then on, one phenomenon followed another. The Central Ocean closed, the Hercynian mountain range rose, the Ural Ocean closed, and the Ural Mountains rose. During this terrestrial transformation, our planet was far from Azoic. Living beings witnessed the beginnings of the formation of Pangea at the end of the Carboniferous period. The Earth was already vegetated, the terrestrial soil conquered by a few species, and the ocean teeming with life. Pangea is still in the very early stages of its formation, but this slow progression is already having an impact on life. I can see you admiring the Carboniferous panorama as it unfolds before your eyes. You probably have a few questions about this landscape and would like to learn more. We're going to cross some of these sites to find out who's hiding there. Come and follow me. By this time, at the end of the Carboniferous period, vegetation was already becoming abundant. There were many specimens of the Phyllocophyte family, ferns and trees of various sizes. There was also an explosion of seed plants and conifers. This is the landscape you're looking at, which once fossilized many years later, gave rise to the coal deposits. Hard coal is a sedimentary, carbonaceous rock that corresponds to a specific grade of coal. Blackish in color, it comes from the carbonization of plant organisms. It is for this reason that the period is known as the Carboniferous. These large deposits of charcoal are due to the appearance of trees with bark, and in particular, those with woody bark, but also to the spread of vast swamps and forests in North America and Eurasia. The formation of these swamps was undoubtedly favored by very low sea levels. Large trees can be seen here, including lepidodendrons up to 40 meters or 130 feet high, which belong to the arborescent Lycophyte family, calamites around 10 meters or 30 feet high, which closely resemble the horsetails we know today, Sigillaria, Neuropterus, and of course tree ferns such as Sphenopterus. A few meters away, another large tree takes up a lot of space. This is a Glossopteridium. It's a deciduous plant. It could reach 30 meters or 100 feet in height. This tree tells us a great deal about the climate of the time. In fact, the wood of its trunk and branches shows rings, suggesting that the climate at the time had distinct seasons. The tree's reproductive apparatus, the kind of fruit you can see at the end of the branch, is called Dictyopteridium in this species. It looks a bit like a half-open pea pod. Inside, this pod-shaped leaf houses the plant's ovules. For the operation to work and give birth to a new tree, the pollen grain, the microsporangium found at the edge of the male fertile leaves in these small clusters, must find its way to the ovules. The male reproductive system is called Eretmonia. A little further on, you can see a sister group of conifers that could be called primitive conifers or archaic conifers. These are Chordaetes lungatus. Chordaetel's leaves resemble long ribbons with parallel veins that can occasionally dichotomize, i.e. split in two. There's also a whole family of pteridospermales in abundance here and there, made up of the so-called seed ferns. Sphenopterus, which we saw earlier, belongs to this group. The frond of this type of fern could reach almost 50 centimeters or 20 inches in length. As you can imagine, all this vegetation was home to many animal species. For the moment, they've remained fairly discreet, but believe me, given the size of some of them, we're not likely to miss them. Come on, follow me. We're going to retrace our steps a little and get a little closer to this marshy body of water. It's the perfect time to talk about the rising waters. This event lasted millions of years and began just before the beginning of the Carboniferous period, towards the end of the Devonian. This gradual adaptation of fauna from an aquatic to a terrestrial environment is a key stage in the evolution of living organisms. Appearing during the Devonian, the stegocephalon fish, Ichthyostega, is an important evolutionary element. It is the missing link between crossopterygian fish and amphibians. Its body is much better adapted to combat gravity. Because on land everything changes, as water no longer plays the role of lift. Musculature and bone structure are strengthened. This enables these animals to move more easily, without expending considerable energy to do so. But these are not the only criteria that have evolved. Unlike Elginerpeton penchini or Abrachovectus gracilis, both of which are also stegocephales, Ichthyostega is much better adapted to life on land. It's a tetrapodomorph, a primitive tetrapod of sorts. Its four limbs are clearly visible. Scientists assume that its tail was used for swimming. Its legs, mainly the front ones, could have been used on land. We have here one of the first vertebrate specimens to have ventured onto land. According to the latest investigations, it would have moved around, like pinnipeds, sea lions, or seals, for example. What you can't see, however, is the way it breathes. It has lungs, but it also uses gills to evacuate carbon dioxide. Its respiratory system is a perfect in-between, half aquatic and half terrestrial. Thanks to these new abilities, these primitive amphibians can covet new territories, especially wetlands. Bodies of water serve mainly as breeding grounds, but are no longer their living environment outside the mating season. Over millions of years, thanks to abundant nature and lush vegetation, animals have been able to get along, develop, and multiply. Winged insects, millipedes, spiders, scorpions, amphibians, and reptiles lived among horsetails, giant ferns, and the first conifers. The Carboniferous forest is teeming with life. And yet, paradoxical as it may seem, very few of these vertebrates and invertebrates are vegetarians. That's right. This diet was not yet on the menu of the species that populated the Earth's soil at that time. And let me warn you, this is far from being their only particularity. The Carboniferous, it's the age of giants. Indeed, that's one of the other important facts to note about this period. If the Jurassic and Cretaceous eras are known for being lands of giants, home to colossal dinosaurs, the Carboniferous also has some extraordinarily large specimens to its credit. Just look at the imposing size of these primitive insects. Here's Stenodictia, a primitive flying insect measuring around 9 centimeters or 3.5 inches. Another member of the Paleodictyoptera family is Dunbarria falcipennis. As you can see, the cerci, the appendages located on the rear segment of the animal, are also very long compared to the rest of the body. They are sometimes twice as long as the length of the abdomen. In our Dunbarria, these appendages were probably sensory organs. But for some, they are also a pincer weapon, or a reproductive organ. Although this specimen is rather generous in size, it is far from reaching the measurements of the giant dragonfly, Meganeura monnier, with its 70 centimeter or 28-inch wingspan. While its size is impressive, it doesn't weigh much considering the width of its wings, barely 150 grams. As you can see, it likes wetlands. She lives close to rivers and bodies of water, like this vast expanse of marshland. Meganeura is a super predator. She hunts in flight and can perform some feats thanks to her efficient wings, perfect for rapid changes of direction. What's more, she has 360-degree vision. No prey escapes her piercing vision. Last but not least, it also has strong spiny legs. This enables it to seize its prey with great ease. This dragonfly is not the only one to boast vertiginous dimensions for insects. Carboniferous millipedes are equally impressive. Here, it's a Acanther pestes. It measures around 50 centimeters or 20 inches. That's already impressive for an animal of this kind, at least according to our current image. However, Arthropleura beats these records by a wide margin, with a length of almost 1.5 meters or 5 feet. This Arthropleura, armata, can even reach 2.5 meters or 8 feet, weighing around 50 kilograms or 110 pounds. It's one of the largest terrestrial invertebrates ever discovered. Fortunately for us, the animal is a herbivore, but that doesn't stop it from being impressively charismatic. Its flattened body was made up of 30 articulated segments. Each was covered by 2 side plates, but also by a central plate. Another species equally impressive for its size is Megarachne cervini. This is a member of the Eurypterid family, mostly aquatic animals that have been nicknamed sea scorpions. But this specimen is a bit special. It's one of the rare terrestrial Eurypterid species. Megarachne cervini resembles a spider. This primitive arachnid is quite imposing, the size of a human face, enough to surprise and frighten those who don't take these little beasts as friends. The body is 34 centimeters or 13 inches long, with a distance between the upper legs of up to 60 centimeters or 24 inches. If all these creatures are giants, it's because the environment in which they live lends itself to their dizzying growth. During the Carboniferous period, impressive rainforests covered the planet, trapping carbon and pumping enormous amounts of oxygen into the atmosphere. Since spiders and insects need lots of oxygen to grow, conditions were ideal for them. The Carboniferous gigantism displayed by arthropods, animals with jointed feet and segmented bodies such as the giant centipede, Arthropleura, the giant dragonfly, Meganeura, and also amphibians, can therefore be explained by the high level of oxygen in the air. At the time, it was close to 35% instead of the current 21%. But that's not the only reason. It could also be that the virtual absence of predators and abundance of food favored their dizzying growth. These giant insects and spiders had very few enemies. For the most part, they were at the top of their food chain. But gigantism wasn't limited to these animals. Amphibians also had their own heavyweight category. While we're still in the Carboniferous period, I'd like to introduce you to the first tetrapod amphibians. The warm, humid environment combined with the wide availability of atmospheric oxygen, contributed to the development of many of these species. Here's one of them. He's waiting patiently for us at the edge of this body of water. He's probably out hunting. Let's not get too close or he'll lose his meal. This is an actinodon. As you can see, it has the appearance of a crocodile. It has a triangular head made of sculpted bones welded together, like today's crocodiles. Nevertheless, it is a member of the amphibian class and the Archaeopoid family. It has a longer prefrontal and a pointed tip. While its head appears quite large, this is not the case with its eyes and nostrils, which form simple little openings on the face. It has a rather stocky, flat shape and averages 80 centimeters in length. If you get a little closer, you'll be able to see its teeth. It's a carnivore with sharp teeth that enable it to seize its prey. Another animal quite similar to this one belongs to the Stegocephalus group. This is the Pederpes. It is, so to speak, an amphibian in the broadest sense, but does not really belong to the group of modern amphibians according to cladistic taxonomy. It inhales air through muscular action, unlike amphibians, which pump air into the lungs through their throat pouches. Like many of the first amphibians to appear during the Carboniferous period, it had a body configuration quite similar to that of today's salamanders. One thing's for sure, it's a tetrapod. It's a vertebrate animal with a skeleton, 2 pairs of limbs, and pulmonary respiration. Tetrapods evolved from tetrapodomorphs, which in turn descended from lobe-finned fish. This is probably why it looks like half a fish. If it weren't for its legs, it might be mistaken for a fish. Its legs confirm that it's not. The feet face forward, so it's perfectly adapted to life on land. However, this does not prevent it from hunting in water and moving easily in an aquatic environment. In fact, its hearing is more developed in water than on land. He probably used this ability to hunt. So much for the terrestrial animals of the Carboniferous. But what about aquatic animals? What animals inhabited the oceans at the dawn of the Panthalassa? Here too, we can say that fauna and flora are developing, diversifying, and becoming increasingly rich on both sides of this vast expanse of saltwater. Nature is very recent on land in the Carboniferous period, but it has long been established in the ocean. Nature is luxuriant on the seabed, and many species have flourished. Over millions of years, corals have expanded and diversified. They have managed to form extensive reefs, particularly in warm waters. Not far from these corals, which provide an ideal natural habitat, animals have taken up residence. Some of them, thanks to their stalks, have managed to cling firmly to the ground. Here you can see yellow blastoids, Orifocrinus, and red crinoids. Both belong to the echinoderm family. You're already familiar with this family, as you probably met a few of its members without even knowing it. Echinoderms are the family of sea urchins and starfish, for example. These animals have an internal skeleton made up of calcite crystals. These calcite crystals may be organized in a light but resistant network in the animal's tissues, or, as in sea urchins, in calcareous plates, forming a carapace covered with a thin layer of cells. Cradled by ocean currents, our crinoids and blastoids sculpt the reef, providing a privileged environment for a variety of species alongside the corals. You'll come across numerous mollusks of all shapes and sizes. Cephalopods are well represented during this period. Here's one of them, a goniatite. Numerous fossils of these animals can be found today, notably in the Urfaud deposit in Morocco. Goniatites have a rather unusual shell. The chambers are separated by zigzag structures. You're probably wondering what all these chambers are for. You're curious. Your question is an interesting one, and I'm delighted you asked it. The largest of the chambers was the animal's living quarters. The other, smaller chambers were filled with gas. These chambers played a hydrostatic role. There are three main types of skeleton: the endoskeleton, as in humans, the exoskeleton, when outside the animal's body, and the hydroskeleton. The skeleton is made up of cavities filled with fluid, which may be in the form of gas, as in the case of the goniatite. These cavities are surrounded by muscles. The pressure of the fluid and the action of the surrounding muscles will modify the body's shape and produce movement. It can swim or dig. Goniatites had two well-developed eyes and tentacles, but their coiled shell, on a single plane, however aesthetically pleasing, was not an asset for swimming. While we're on the subject of biological discoveries, let's take another look at an animal that belongs to the stegocephalin genus. This is the Ichthyostega. This is a large species around 1.5 meters or 5 feet long, somewhat akin to a fish or salamander. Its skeleton is a little unusual, especially the part of the bones that connect the shoulders and hips to the spinal column. The shoulder girdle and pelvic girdle appear to be strong enough to support a terrestrial lifestyle. As far as shape goes, it looks just like a fish. You can even see, if you get close enough, that it has a tail that allows it to swim easily and fins that help it to navigate. There's no shortage of real fish in the ocean. How would you like to catch a glimpse of one? Let's start with one of the oldest fish we know, the Arandaspis. Although it first appeared in the Ordovician period, it played an important role in the Carboniferous era. It has no jaw, but is surrounded by a carapace. It was therefore probably a filter feeder. It has a streamlined body and measures about 15 centimeters or 6 inches. If you look closely at this fish, you'll understand that it has no fins. To move through the water, it had to use propulsion. Its flattened vertical tail would have played this role. It moves somewhat like a tadpole. This one, the Eusthenopteron, appeared in the Devonian period and lived in both fresh and salt water. Unlike our Arandaspis, the Eusthenopteron was equipped with highly efficient fins. In fact, its posterior fin enabled it to make rapid swings. This ability was useful, not only for escape but also for hunting, as the jawline suggests that this was a predator. Climatius, which also appeared in the Devonian period, is a member of the spiny shark family. It probably lived in schools. Climatius was an active swimmer with a powerful caudal fin and stabilizing fins. It fed on other fish, but also on crustaceans on occasion. Its lower jaw was filled with sharp teeth, which, like those of today's sharks, automatically renew themselves when worn. The upper jaw, on the other hand, was completely toothless. But that doesn't stop it from feeding. Although this fish is a good hunter, it still has to watch its back. On land and at sea, danger is always lurking. This time it's a fearsome predator, the anvil shark, Stethecanthus, which is only a few meters away from this shoal of fish. This is one of the very first cartilaginous fish to have lived on our planet. It too has acclimated perfectly to both salt and fresh waters. Stethecanthus can measure between 70 centimeters or 28 inches and 2 meters or 6.5 feet. One of its special features is its dermal denticles. They may have served as a defense against predators who might have had the crazy idea of attacking such a sea behemoth. It posed a real threat, not only to fish, but also to smaller sharks. It's nicknamed the anvil shark because of its brush-like dorsal fin. This is the animal's second specificity. However, it is only found in males. Scientists are now speculating that this anvil or iron-shaped fin may have something to do with reproduction. Speaking of reproduction, there's another striking phenomenon that took place in the Carboniferous period that we really need to talk about: the appearance of the amniotic egg. It was while studying the Carboniferous period that scientists began to identify the presence of the amniotic egg. Their research and analysis revealed the presence of an amniotic sac, i.e., a sac containing a liquid that protects the embryo or fetus. This is an extraordinary event in the world of living organisms. This phenomenon is a minor revolution in the world of biological evolution. Here's why. Some living creatures begin to emerge from the water and settle on land, but you can't go from an aquatic to a terrestrial environment in the blink of an eye. There are many stages to go through, and major evolutions to conquer. The amniotic egg is just one of them. Why do you think this is? How can the amniotic sac help animals survive on Earth? Well, you see, in an aquatic world, water forms a sort of protective barrier against shocks. But on land, there's nothing to protect the unborn child. The fetus or embryo would be at the mercy of the slightest shock, the slightest collision. No matter how small, it could be fatal. The small amniotic sac, made up of a membrane and a liquid called amnion, protects the embryo from shocks and desiccation. It develops in this aqueous environment, amniotic fluid, which is essential to its survival. The next generation develops in the warmth and comfort of a shell, protected from external aggression. We're approaching the end of the Carboniferous period. The animals we've just met may well have witnessed the beginnings of the formation of Pangea. This was the beginning of the collision between Gondwana and Laurentia Baltica, two great continental masses. The collision first took place in the Maritimes on the Laurentia side and in Morocco on the Gondwana side. The latest jolt occurred in the Appalachians. Further west, a piece of ocean was still present. This brings us to the next stage of our journey, the Permian. Here we are, Pangea, a single land, and Panthalassa as far as the eye can see on the horizon. This time, the junction between Euramerica, Asia, and Gondwana really takes shape. During the Permian, it gave rise to the supercontinent we'd been waiting so long to meet. With the exception of part of Southeast Asia, these lands coalesced into a single supercontinent, Pangea. This extended from the equator to the poles and was surrounded by a single ocean, the Panthalassa, or Universal Sea. From the upper Permian onwards, it was no longer completely alone, as another ocean, the Tethys, opened up across Pangea from east to west. As you can imagine, such geographic changes, such geological upheavals, and such significant terrestrial activity had repercussions on life on Earth. Pangea is subject to great variations in temperature and precipitation, depending on the season and time of day. At the center of Pangea, for example, the temperature could go from 0 to 40 degrees Celsius, or from 32 degrees Fahrenheit to 104 degrees Fahrenheit in the course of a single day. For many species, these changing conditions are difficult to cope with. According to scientists, some of them have evolved to adapt to this difficult climate. Some animals are equipped with a kind of veil, probably thermoregulatory, which enables them to capture the sun's heat in the morning and evacuate it during the day. Most of central Pangea is arid, with high temperatures and little precipitation, but in the polar regions, there is still a glacier that has lasted since the Carboniferous period. Since the collision and this new land formation, you can see that the landscape has evolved. First of all, the landforms. The Appalachians in particular, as well as the Ural Mountains and the Austrian Alps, are higher. This era was also marked by the advance of the sea over the land. Sea levels were low throughout the Permian. This was also the beginning of the invasion of the Triassic Sea. The Hercynian chain began to erode under the effect of the elements, and the major volcanoes of the massive Central ceased their activity. As a domino effect, all these geological upheavals had inevitable impact on living organisms, particularly terrestrial animals. The climate, as we have seen, has been impacted by these many changes. Terrestrial activity is undoubtedly at the root of this climatic upheaval. During the Permian, the climate was much drier and warmer, at least on part of the globe, because as we've just seen, the previous ice age still persisted in the southern hemisphere. These variations in climate and temperature have altered the nature of the plants found in the past. Plants that had been abundant up until now will now be hard hit by the drought and harshness of this new climate. These include giant lycopods and horsetails. Smaller seed ferns replace the larger mottles. Conifers are also on the rise. The change is not radical, of course, but takes shape gradually over time. Vegetation at the beginning of the Permian was quite similar to that of the Carboniferous. We find, for example, Lepidodendron and Sigillaria. Then, however, it was gradually replaced by conifers, such as Walshia in the northern hemisphere, or Glossopteridales, which we observed earlier in our trip. In terms of fauna, the Permian is a paradox. it is as synonymous with the development of life on Earth as it is with mass extinction. In fact, many species will make their debut on the scene, but a large number of them will also become extinct as a result of new environmental constraints. But let's not paint a gloomy picture. While it's true that the Permian is synonymous with the end for many animals, it's also synonymous with life and evolution. Let's discover an emblematic species of this period, the Dimetrodon. There are several species in this family of variable size. To give you an order of magnitude, more than 3 meters or 10 feet separate them from each other. The smallest is about 60 centimeters or 24 inches long. This is the Dimetrodon teutonus, but it's the largest that we're interested in here, the Angolensis Dimetrodon. It measures nearly 4 meters or 13 feet. Its main feature is a veil of elongated neural spines. It forms an extension of the vertebrae. The sail is also made up of soft tissue, probably fed by blood vessels. This particularity of this Dimetrodon would have enabled it to withstand the temperature variations of certain geographical areas during the Permian. Remember that in the course of a single day, particularly in the arid regions of central Pangea, temperatures could go from one extreme to the other in just a few hours. To survive, they had to be able to evacuate heat from their bodies. Other groups of animals gradually developed on Earth. The Permian is notably marked by the presence of reptiles. The egg we mentioned earlier, as well as scales and other new physiological abilities, enabled them, thanks to biological evolution, to gradually carve out a place for themselves on the Earth's soil. We find many synapsids, formerly known as mammalian reptiles, anapsids, periosaurs, as well as pelycosaurs, those famous animals with thermoregulating veils we mentioned earlier. Synapsids are the dominant Permian species. Here's the first of them, Elycanops ornatus. Its name means wolf's face. It measures around 1 meter or 3 feet and weighs around 15 kilos. Its skull is rather long and thin. The fangs in its mouth are quite similar to those of canids. They are located on the upper and lower jaws. It also has sharp-pointed canines, ideal for stabbing prey and tearing flesh. Another synapsid also lived in the Permian. It's called Inostrancevia alexandri. It too is a carnivore. Its skeleton is very robust, its skull broad and thick, and its dentition very advanced, with canines that are longer than the other teeth. They could reach 15 centimeters or 6 inches in length. What's more, the opening angle of its jaw is particularly wide. It could seize its prey with ease and inflict fatal bites. On this rock is a Daphosaurus bonerges, also a member of the synapsid class. Unlike the other two, it has a dorsal sail. It measures between 50 centimeters or 20 inches and 3 meters or 10 feet for the largest specimens. Its sail enables it to regulate its temperature. It absorbs and evacuates heat according to its needs. It is a herbivore and a tetrapod. This means it has 2 pairs of limbs and its breathing is pulmonary. The Dinocephalus group has a much thicker, more massive skull. The Dinocephalus group was also widely present during the Permian. These animals vary in shape and size. They can also have very different diets. Some are carnivores or omnivores, while others are herbivores. The Dinocephalus, Tapinocephalus, like the Euramerica, is one of these large herbivores. It weighs up to 2 tons and measures around 4.5 meters or 15 feet in length. Until now, we've always talked about carnivorous species. This Dinocephalon is our very first animal to adopt a new diet in the history of life. It was one of the first large herbivores. Despite its massive body, it was the preferred prey of the Dinocephalus titanophonius. To give you an idea of its predatory abilities, its name means Titanic killer in ancient Greek. It measures 3 meters or 10 feet in length. Its head alone measures over 80 centimeters or 31 inches. One of the omnivorous dinocephalons of the Permian was Estimenosuchus orellensis. Its name means crowned crocodile. It is very impressive. Its skull has cranial protuberances. These are like horns on the forehead. Although the animal can easily measure 4 meters or 13 feet in length, its skull remains very imposing in proportion to the rest of its body. It exceeds 68 centimeters or 27 inches in length. The Permian is also characterized by the presence of numerous reptiles that acclimatize perfectly to life on the continent. These include Aphylosaurus lutavensis, a reptile less than a meter long. A much more massive member of the genus is Scutosaurus. Its name means shield lizard. Unlike many reptiles, it held its legs under its body. This enabled it to support its imposing weight, as it weighed close to a ton and measured between 2.5 and 3 meters long, or up to 10 feet. Another specimen I'd like to introduce you to is the Euramerica. It's much smaller than the Scutosaurus, isn't it? It's just 25 centimeters or 10 inches long. But it's well worth stopping for a moment to take a closer look. I wanted to introduce you to this little lizard because, unlike any other vertebrate we've come across so far, this one has adopted a very particular gait. As you can see, it walks on its 2 hind legs. It's probably the very first bipedal vertebrate in the history of our planet. Let's take advantage of our little jaunt along this stretch of water to talk to you again about amphibians. Their appearance is very peculiar, and they are actually quite different from one another, despite the fact that they belong to the same class. The first is a Platyhystrix. It has a fairly compact body, short legs, and a tail. What sets it apart from the others is its dorsal sail. Like some synapsids, it has a dorsal veil that gives it the appearance of a porcupine. On his back and along his tail, you can also see that he has thick, hard plates. This was undoubtedly a means of defense against predators. The second amphibian I'd like to introduce you to is an Euryopus megacephalus. It's quite an imposing animal too, at 2 meters or 7 feet long, and 200 kilos or 440 pounds. It looks like a cross between a frog and a crocodile, or a large salamander. Its 4 limbs and long tail are clearly visible. Like frogs, it has curved teeth, making it a carnivore. It also has 3 pairs of backward curving fangs. This gives us a clue to its hunting style. It traps its prey and swallows it. Each of its backward-pointing, bony projections pushes its meal a little further down its throat. Its dentition enables it to grasp even slippery prey with ease. Now we come to Diplacallus. This is a lepospondyle amphibian that could reach a meter in length. Individuals of various sizes are known. It can be recognized by its boomerang-shaped skull. The purpose of this protuberance on the head is unclear. Scientists have put forward several hypotheses on the subject. The first is that its small limbs and short tail would not have made it a very good swimmer. Its skull could perhaps serve as an underwater sail, allowing it to lean on ocean currents and rise to the surface, or conversely, to gently sink back to the bottom. The second hypothesis is more defensive in nature. Indeed, given its shape, the Diplacallus would be a rather difficult animal to swallow. The final theory suggests a camouflage function of sorts. The broad, supple skin lining the boomerang-shaped bony part may have been very similar in color to the seabed of its habitat. The amphibian could then lurk on the ground and wait patiently for prey to pass by. Let's take advantage of our immersion in the water to take a dip in the Panthalassa. What do you say? The air is dry and the heat hard to bear, so the water will cool us down. And who knows, we might even meet some new species. Here we are in the vast ocean. As you can see, the reefs have changed a lot. They're bigger and richer, and the species that live there are much more varied. Corals are back, of course, whether colonial or solitary, but they are no longer the only experienced builders shaping the architecture of these precious reefs. Sponges have made it possible to extend this shelter to an infinite number of species. Look at this sponge, easily over 2 meters or 7 feet long. It's a Gigantospongia, a yellow sponge. Brachiopods also love this corner of the ocean. It's a veritable little paradise where food abounds and hiding places are plentiful. The reefs provide them with food, but also protection from the most fearsome and dangerous predators. When that's not enough, nature reshuffles the evolutionary deck. Here you can see a brachiopoda that's a bit special. It's a Nautiloides, Cuperoceras. Look closely at the shell and you'll notice that it's covered in spines. They are filter feeders, which means they feed on very small organisms, such as zooplankton and phytoplankton, or suspended organic particles. They are also sometimes called suspension feeders. These animals are equipped with a system that filters the water to capture only the microorganisms. Other animals have adopted the same filtration diet, including certain mollusks such as lamellibranch mollusks. In the Panthalassa Ocean, mollusks are teeming with life. Cephalopods, goniotites, and nautilus have developed extensively in the surrounding area. They come in all shapes and sizes. But all these crustaceans have to watch their backs. As an aquatic reptile, the Mesosaurus is known for its ferocious appetite. Measuring around 1 meter, it has long, sharp teeth. It uses the power of its tail and feet to propel itself through the water. When hunger strikes, it goes on the hunt. Plankton, fish eggs, small larvae, and crustaceans are no match for its sharp teeth. This aquatic lizard must also have crossed paths with the many fish that inhabit the ocean. Cartilaginous fish, ray-finned bony fish, and flesh-finned bony fish have invaded the ocean. These fish are on the alert. Danger lurks. In the distance, in their wake, a helicoprion is hot on their trail. It's a member of the shark family. It measures between 8 and 10 meters long, or around 30 feet. Its lower jaw is a veritable killing machine, with a spiral dental structure. This spiral measures 30 centimeters or 12 inches in diameter, and has no fewer than 160 teeth. Everyone here has found their place. Each species evolves and participates in the great cycle of life. We're about to leave this sea, churned up by hunting in the depths, and yet so calm on the surface. All the animals we've met, both marine and terrestrial, could hardly have imagined what was about to happen: an unprecedented mass extinction. The causes of this extinction, of the disappearance of thousands of species, are still very unclear today. Many hypotheses have been put forward. The first evokes the asphyxiation of the oceans. Another puts the emphasis on strong volcanic activity. Yet another suggests a major drop in sea level. According to a 2019 study published in the journal Nature, plants and vegetation were the first victims of this extinction. Scientists have found traces in several parts of the Earth of large quantities of nickel released into the atmosphere following volcanic eruptions in Siberia. This would then have poisoned plant life. The massive disappearance of plants led to the disappearance of herbivores, followed by carnivores. This event, affecting vegetation, is one of two mass extinctions of plants, the other being the collapse of the Carboniferous rainforest 305 million years ago. The Permian Triassic extinction led to the loss of 95% of marine species and 75% of terrestrial species in less than 4 million years. The consequence of this mass extinction, due to the depletion of oxygen in the atmosphere, favored species with air sacs, including the ancestors of the dinosaurs. This is how the archosaurs, which include the crocodilians, dinosaurs, and pterosaurs, as well as certain synapsids, such as the cynodonts, ancestors of modern mammals, escaped the mass extinction. It's time for us to leave this desolate landscape and hit the road for the Triassic. We leave the Paleozoic to take our first steps into the Mesozoic. The first era of the Mesozoic, the Triassic, is also the last stage of our journey. In fact, the Earth's activity is about to change the order of things once again. Nature is constantly evolving. Nothing is ever the same. In a few million years' time, animals will no longer be able to cross from one continent to another without difficulty and with dry feet. Pangea will gradually begin its slow fragmentation. Before discussing this phenomenon, we need to get to the Panthalassa Ocean while there's still time. Soon, the seabed won't be the same here either. We've left the ocean on a tragic note for all living organisms of this era. The ocean is still recovering from this major extinction. The lower Triassic is marked by a slow and difficult rediversification of species after the Permian-Triassic crisis. Almost all species were wiped off the map. Coral reefs are struggling to recover, renew, and reconstitute themselves. It was in the ocean that life first hatched on Earth. The ocean will manage to rise from its ashes. Although corals have almost disappeared, some species have survived and are now gradually coming back to life at the bottom of the sea. Hexacoralliar corals are replacing tetracoralliar corals. Calcareous algae are also invaluable architects, enriching and diversifying young reefs. They provide an extraordinary environment for mollusks, such as this pretty cephalopod, an ammonite, Ceratites, semipartitus, a mollusk with a coiled shell. Other species try to make a place for themselves in the vast ocean. Look, here's a crinoid. Crinoids are, remember, echinoderms like the starfish or sea urchin. Reptiles also invade the marine environment. Placodonts, nothosaurs, and ichthyosaurs populate warm waters. Let's begin our journey by discovering some placodonts, marine sauropsids from the Triassic period. They belong to the marine diapsids, whose bodies are protected by a carapace of enlarged ribs, or even fused ribs in some species. Their large cobblestone-like teeth crushed the shells they plucked from the seabed. They could even pluck them from rocks, thanks to the flattened teeth at the front of their jaws. They are all very large, between 2 and 3 meters, or between 6 and 10 feet for most of them. Despite their size, they are not large carnivores in the strict sense of the word. As we said a moment ago, they feed mainly on bivalves, brachiopods, and other small invertebrates. They have flat, rather large protruding teeth that enable them to easily crush even the most solid shells. Here is just such a placodont. Placodonts vary in shape. Some are rather elongated, like Placodus or Paraplacodus, while others are more turtle-like, like Cephiderma or Placochelys, for example. The latter, Placochelys, has a carapace. It's covered with a series of bony bumps that give it a rigid, solid structure. This is called osteoderm protection. This structure in the dermal layers of the skin is a means of defense against many predators. After a timid attempt in the Permian, diapsids also invaded the marine environment. The Nothosaurus seen here on the hunt is also a mixed creature, like our latest placodonts, but this time not in appearance, but in its living environment. About 3 meters or 10 feet tall, it has short webbed legs and an elongated neck that ends in a flattened head. The jaws bristling with long, sharp teeth leave no doubt as to the animal's fish-eating diet. It divided its time between land and water, much like today's seals. While these Nothosaurus were most often found in the water to feed on fish, they could also haul themselves up onto beaches to rest and enjoy the warmth of the sun. Scientists assume that they also came to the surface during the egg-laying season. They then laid their eggs on land, just like the sea turtles we know. Let's leave this Nothosaurus to enjoy his meal and continue our investigations into a new group, the ichthyosaurs. Ichthyosaurs are marine diapsid vertebrates. They are somewhat similar to dolphins. Californosaurus measures around 3 meters or 10 feet. It has a head with a long snout, but it looks very small in proportion to the rest of the body. It also has a bent tail and a small vertical fin on its back. Eutatsasaurus shares some features with our previous marine diapsid. Its head is small, and the rest of its body much more massive. There are also 2 pairs of fins on the flanks. Eutatsasaurus lacks a dorsal fin, however. This does not prevent it from being an excellent swimmer. Like Eutatsasaurus, Chauhosaurus gaishenensis has no dorsal fin. It is also much smaller, measuring less than 2 meters or 7 feet, and weighing between 10 and 45 kilograms, or 6 and 30 pounds. Its backbone allows it to undulate, rather like an eel. It lives in the shallow waters of continental shelves. Mixosaurus is also a primitive ichthyosaurian and measures between 1 and 2 meters or 7 feet in length. Mixosaurus has long, narrow jaws with sharp teeth, perfectly suited to fishing. It lies between the primitive ichthyosaurs and more evolved forms. It has a small dorsal fin and a flipper-like outline on the upper part of its tail. This fin is supported by a slightly arched spine. Its limbs are shaped like swimming paddles, with those in front larger than those behind. Each flipper has 5 fingers. These ichthyosaurs probably cross paths with Perlatus, an actinopterygian fish. Actinopterygians are bony fish whose fins are supported by rays. The Perlatus measures 15 centimeters or 6 inches. It is toothed and its jaw has a wide opening angle. It also has dorsal and anal fins, giving it a certain ease of movement in the water. Another common Triassic fish is the Babasatrania. It managed to survive the Permian Triassic extinction. It lives in coastal and shallow waters off Pangea. It has several types of fins and is a very good swimmer. Its shape is rather elongated and round. Its teeth are flat and solid, enabling it to feed on shells. It crushes and grinds them. Speaking of shells, this brings us to another subject. The global climate remains warm throughout the Triassic period, and at the end of the Triassic, this particular climate favored the appearance of a new type of plankton, the calcareous shelled plankton and nanoplankton, which were to profoundly alter the ecology and the marine food chain, as well as ocean chemistry. Plankton is no longer essentially vegetable, but also animal. Before I leave the ocean, I'd like to introduce you to one last marine species. Here's an amazing marine reptile, Atopodondatus unicus. It has a very elongated body, rather large limbs compared to what we've seen so far, and a singular head. This peculiar shape suggested that it was a supensivorous microphagous animal. In other words, it feeds on very small organisms and organic food particles, filtering the water in suspension. But after observing new fossils and remains of these animals, it turns out to be a herbivore after all. This makes it one of the oldest known herbivorous marine reptiles. During this trip, you'll have had the chance to discover many iconic species of their period. But it's already time for you to continue your journey, leaving the vast ocean behind and heading for land. There you'll see how nature is slowly coming back to life. Although it never really disappeared, it was running out of steam and becoming increasingly impoverished. Lycopodiales, cycadales, ginkgophytes, and glossopterides gradually gave way to conifers. Plant cover is now increasingly lush, especially in the northern hemisphere. However, Pangea's great size undoubtedly limited the influence of the ocean on its climate, and large deserts were therefore to extend to the center of Pangea. Here, living conditions were much more difficult, even hostile. While a few amphibians and mammalian reptiles survived the Permian-Triassic crisis, diapsid reptiles became increasingly important. One of them, the Archosaurus, even played a key role in biological evolution. According to scientific studies, Archosaurus gave rise to crocodiles, dinosaurs, and pterosaurs, but also to groups that disappeared at the end of the Triassic, such as phytosaurs, atosaurs, and Rosocians. This Euparkeria is one of the best-known archosaurs of its time. Euparkeria carpensis has a slender body, a long tail, and an elongated head. It's a small one by the standards of what we encountered a few moments ago. It measures around 55 centimeters or 22 inches and weighs just 10 kilograms or 22 pounds. It has small sting-like teeth and a pointed thumb claw. This enables it to dig for insects or small amphibians burrowed in soil or wood. Here, large predators are numerous and dangerous. To find its place in the cycle of life and provide for its nutritional needs, this little Euparkeria has found the answer: speed. Its hind legs, which are longer than its front ones, enable it to run over short distances, either to escape a predator or to flush out prey. Another archosomorph, diapsid, is also present in the area. This time we're dealing with a member of the Rhynchosaurian family. It's a Hyperodepeton huxleya. It has a short triangular skull, perfectly interlocking jaws, and several rows of teeth. Its lower jaw has 2 rows of teeth, one on the upper edge and another a little lower, on the inner edge. It also has a premaxilla, or incisor bone. This is a split cranial bone located in the anterior part of the upper jaw and equipped with teeth. The latter can be seen protruding from the mouth. Despite all this dental armada, the Hyperodapedon huxleyi is a herbivore. Who would have thought? It feeds on tough plants. To do this, it has powerful chewing muscles. Claws are also an asset, enabling him to feed more easily. It can scratch the ground and dig up roots and tubers. The approaching animal, on the other hand, is anything but a herbivore. In fact, it's a cousin of the crocodile. It's a Rosocian reptile, the Tychnosuchus. Its entire body is covered with a veritable armor of bony plates, excrescences composed of chitin, dentin, or keratin, found notably in crocodilians. Its limbs lie directly under its body, almost vertically. It has a more evolved and complex ankle joint, making it a formidable predator. It is fast, efficient, and hunts reptiles and fish. The Tanystropheus I'd like to introduce you to now is also very different from the other members of the reptile group. This time, it has a very long neck of 3 meters and measures almost 6 meters or 20 feet in total. Its tail and neck are very impressive. This Tanystropheus is quite enigmatic even today. Scientists have put forward 2 hypotheses about its diet and lifestyle. The first is that it used its long neck to reach high up in the trees to flush out small tree-dwelling reptiles. Others think it was a fish eater. It is not adapted to aquatic life, but it can travel along the coast, and thanks to its long neck, reach the shoals of fish on the seashore. Here's a Thrinaxodon that belongs to the synapsids. Thrinaxodon is about 50 centimeters or 20 inches long and weighs 3 kilograms or 7 pounds. It is similar to both a reptile and a mammal and shares a number of criteria with both groups. It has a semi-erect posture on its limbs. This brings it closer to reptiles. But it also has vibrissae and probably a fur-covered body. One hypothesis even suggests a principle of homeothermy, i.e., an internal temperature, independent of the environment it occupies. However, these characteristics are more closely related to a mammal. If it managed to survive the Permian crisis, it's undoubtedly thanks to its lifestyle. This nocturnal animal is a burrower. Its dentition is differentiated with incisors, canines, and molars. It hunts small herbivores and invertebrates. During the Triassic period, many insects were present. Biological evolution also took place in this group, as the first fully metamorphosing insects gradually took hold. Complete metamorphosis is also known as holometabolous development. This means that metamorphosis passes through 4 distinct stages: egg, larva, nymph, and imago, or adult. This is the case for Coleoptera, Diptera, and Lepidoptera. During the Triassic period, beetles such as Cardiocine elegans and Cardiocine obesa could be seen. Speaking of evolution, the Triassic was marked by the arrival of the planet's first dinosaurs. They arrived at the end of the Triassic, so you can't leave the Triassic without meeting a handful of them. Let's start with a medium-sized specimen, Colophysis. It lives close to waterways and can reach 3 meters or 10 feet in length and a height of around 1 meter or 3 feet. It weighs between 15 and 30 kilograms, or between 30 and 70 pounds for the largest. It has knife-like teeth curved backwards to feed on small animals such as lizards or small mammals, but it can also hunt in packs. It can then attack much larger animals, such as the Placerius, a herbivore weighing close to a ton. The Euramerica, on the other hand, lived on floodplains where volcanic activity is very strong. Seasonal variations are common, and heavy rains common in the region. 1 meter long and 40 centimeters or 16 inches high, This small dinosaur is bipedal and weighs barely 10 kilos. Here we have one of the rare omnivorous specimens. It feeds not only on small animals, but also on tender leaves and fruit. Its only defense tactic is to flee. The construction of its skeleton and the position of its limbs give it great speed of movement. Another tetrapod dinosaur of the same size lived in swampy regions. Here it found insects, lizards, and other small prey in abundance, as well as plenty of hiding places from larger predators, such as archosaurian carnivores. Procompsognathus was long, just over a meter, but not very long, just 30 centimeters or 12 inches. It weighed no more than 2.5 kilograms or 6 pounds. He too is bipedal. He has short arms and hands with 3 clawed fingers. It also has a rather long snout and numerous small teeth that enable it to tear up its prey. However, it must beware of the Titanosuchus ferox, or the Rutiodon carolinensis, both of which are Procompsognathus's main predators. All these animals have probably also crossed paths with 2 herbivores living in the same region, Plateosaurus or Euphrasia. Plateosaurus is a sauropodomorph dinosaur, weighing almost 4 tons. It measured 8 meters or 26 feet in length. Although it walked on 4 legs, it could also run on its 2 hind legs when necessary. The Plateosaurus had a small head and an elongated body. Its strong, robust limbs and long, heavy tail were equipped with powerful muscles. Its long neck enabled it to reach foliage 3 or 4 meters or 13 feet above the ground. The Euphrasia is also bipedal and quadrupedal. This herbivore has a premaxillary bone bearing 4 teeth. It used gastroliths, stomach stones, which it swallowed and stored in the stomach to help grind food and provide minerals. I'd like to end this journey into the Triassic period with one of the oldest dinosaurs, or rather one of the very first of its kind. It may not be the ancestor of all dinosaurs, but it is undoubtedly a close relative. Herrerasaurus ishigualastensis is 3 meters or 10 feet long, exclusively bipedal, and a predator capable of attacking virtually any vertebrate in its ecosystem. It has a highly articulated jaw and curved teeth for tearing flesh. The arm and forearm are fairly short, while the hand is elongated. The first 2 fingers and thumb end in sharp curved claws for grasping prey. The 4th and 5th fingers are stumps without claws. It has strong hind legs with short thighs and fairly long feet, indicating that it was probably a fast runner. The partially stiffened tail balanced the body and was also adapted for speed. Although it shares most of the characteristics of dinosaurs, there are a few differences, particularly in the shape of its hips and the bones of its hind limbs. It is undoubtedly a very primitive representative of the dinosaurs, and one of the oldest known to date. This one, like all the others, is probably not ready for what lies ahead. Although Pangea began to fracture at the end of the Permian, it was not until the end of the Triassic period that the changes were really felt. Rift systems separate North America and Africa. These rifts are collapse trenches located along a fracture in the Earth's crust during the process of extension. Pangea underwent this fracture in 2 stages. The first began with the opening of Tethys along an east-to-west axis that separated Laurasia to the north and Gondwana to the south. During the Cenozoic, it was the Indian Ocean's turn to open up. Plates migrated northwards, and the Atlantic Ocean also opened up. At the same time, the Arabian-African plate rose and the Neotethys closed, leading to the formation of the Alpine Belt. These radical changes, this fracturing of the Earth, this internal activity of the Earth, were to have irreparable consequences, whether on the landscape, the climate, or life itself. How did all this happen? How did animals live through this period? We'll be looking for the answers on our next trip